Everyone thinks they know what betrayal looks like. But sometimes, it's not cheating or lying. Sometimes, it's being the one who stays silent and lets you carry the weight alone. My name is Emily. I'm 34. I live in a quiet apartment just outside Denver, a place that smells like fresh paint and freedom. On paper, I'm a project manager for a mid-sized tech firm. Organized, reliable, the kind of person who sends calendar invites for coffee. But if you saw me at work, crisp blazer, polite laugh, always early, you'd never guess the mess I came from. Because I got really good at pretending. That's what my childhood trained me for. My mom always said I was the responsible one, which, in our house, meant I didn't cry too loudly, didn't spill juice, didn't talk back. My older brother, Matt, was the golden boy, all charm and chaos. He crashed the car once, and my parents paid off the mechanic before anyone found out. I got grounded for losing a library book. I learned early, if I made myself useful, quiet, invisible, things stayed calm, or at least less chaotic. So I made straight A's. I folded the laundry before anyone asked. I apologized, constantly, even when I didn't know what I'd done. They called me mature for my age. But really, I was just scared. Scared of being blamed. Scared of being in the way. Scared of turning into the thing my parents rolled their eyes at when they watched other people's kids. My dad was distant, not cruel, not warm, just absent. His presence felt like a threat waiting to happen. You'd feel it in the tension of dinner forks scraping plates too hard. And my mom? She weaponized silence. She didn't scream. She didn't hit. She just shut down. For hours. Sometimes days. Like a door slamming inside her that I wasn't allowed to open. I remember once, I was maybe 10. I came home from school with a painting I made. I was so proud of it. Bright colors. My name in the corner. I held it up and said, "Look, Mom." She barely glanced at it. Said, "Go wash your hands. You're tracking dirt." I still remember the way the corners of that paper curled while it sat untouched on the counter. That's the thing about emotional neglect. It's quiet. It doesn't leave bruises, just these invisible edits to who you think you're allowed to be. As I got older, the praise I got came with strings. Emily never needs help. Emily always holds it together. And so, I did. Even when I was crumbling. In high school, I had panic attacks that looked like stomach bugs. I'd excuse myself from class, hide in the bathroom, and sob into my sleeves. No one ever asked. No one wanted to ask. I became the girl who listened to everyone else's pain but never shared her own. The emotional sponge, the fixer, the one who should have known better. And deep down, I started to believe maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too much, or not enough, or both, somehow. So I wore the smile they trained me to wear, and I told myself this was just what love looked like, quiet, conditional, and always a little bit painful. Matt could do no wrong. He smoked weed in the garage at 16, and my mom laughed like it was some rebellious phase boys go through. When I got caught texting after 10 p.m., she confiscated my phone for a month and said I was testing boundaries. It always went like that. When Matt flunked a class, the teacher didn't like him. When I got a B+, it was, "What happened, Emily?" When Matt forgot our dad's birthday, nobody said a word. When I forgot to thaw the chicken once, it turned into a lecture about responsibility and being a burden on Mom. I lived in the cracks between their expectations. Not seen, only evaluated. And the worst part? I didn't even hate Matt. I just hated how invisible I became around him. how my silence was expected while his noise was forgiven. It's like the whole family ran on this unspoken script. Matt was the star, Mom was the martyr, Dad was the ghost. And me? I was the backstage crew, making sure the play ran smoothly, even if no one clapped for me. I remember one night, I think I was 19, I came home from college for winter break. I had just aced my midterms, finally picked a major, and even got a campus job. I sat down at the dinner table, hoping someone would ask how I was doing. But the moment I opened my mouth, Matt walked in, late, reeking of beer, grinning like a golden retriever. My mom lit up like he'd just returned from war. "Matthew!" she beamed. "We saved you a plate." No one asked how my finals went. No one even noticed I hadn't spoken for 20 minutes. That night, I cried in the guest room, quietly, into a pillow. I didn't want to ruin the mood. That's what they always told me. Don't ruin it. Don't overreact. Don't make things about you. But how do you not make it about you when you're constantly the one cleaning up, shutting up, and showing up? By then, I'd learned the patterns. Mom only gave affection when I was useful. Dad only spoke up when I made a mistake. Matt only noticed me when he needed help, or someone to blame. The emotional bruises don't show up in family photos, but they live in your body. They change your voice, your posture, the way you enter a room. They make you apologize before you even speak. They make you afraid to need anything, especially love, because love in our house came with price tags. Love looked like pleasing, performing, predicting everyone's needs but your own. Love was swallowing your feelings until they became acid in your chest. I didn't know it at the time, but I was living with a kind of grief. A grief for something I never even had. The grief of not being chosen. Not for the sports team, not for the school play, but for something deeper. For belonging. For being enough. Just by existing. I used to think maybe if I was prettier, thinner, funnier, more like the girls Matt dated, maybe then I'd matter. Maybe then Mom would brag about me the way she bragged about him. Maybe Dad would remember my birthday without checking the calendar. But I could never compete with a myth, and Matt had become a myth, a golden boy built from blind spots and excuses. So I folded myself smaller, became easy, became low maintenance, became a shadow of someone I might have been if I'd been allowed to shine. It's a strange thing, to grow up in a house full of people and still feel like a ghost. There wasn't one moment that broke me. No scream, no slap, no big explosion. It was quieter than that. So quiet, I almost missed it. I was 27, still living at home, still helping out. I told myself it was temporary, just until I saved up, just until the promotion came, just until. That's the thing about just until. It becomes a life sentence if you're not careful. I worked full-time, cooked dinner 3 nights a week, handled my mom's prescriptions, paid half the utilities, and made sure Matt's mail didn't pile up when he vanished for weeks. No one asked me to. They just expected it. And I complied. Because I was the good one. Because I'd been raised to believe that love had to be earned. And even then, it might not come. Then one Thursday, I remember because it was raining, I came home exhausted. My boss had criticized my presentation in front of the whole team. I hadn't eaten since 10 a.m. All I wanted was to heat some soup and sit in silence. But the second I walked in the door, my mom was waiting, arms crossed, mouth tight, like a storm she'd been saving just for me. "Where were you?" she snapped. "I had a late meeting. Matt called. He said you forgot to forward him the rent reminder. He almost missed the payment." I blinked. That's not my job. And I swear the silence that followed could have cracked glass. Not because of what she said next, but because she said nothing. Just that look. That same look from my childhood. Disappointment mixed with blame, like I'd betrayed the family somehow, over a rent reminder. I felt something shift inside me. For years, I swallowed it all. The guilt, the blame, the endless emotional invoices no one ever paid me back for. But in that moment, in that stupid rain-drenched hallway, I felt it. The end of my good girl era. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked past her, poured soup into a bowl, and said nothing. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal. But for me, that was revolution. Because silence had always been her weapon. And that day, I made it mine. She didn't speak to me for 2 days after that. Then, on the third day, she slid a passive-aggressive note under my bedroom door. Something about losing respect and not pulling my weight. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have words, but because, for once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. That was the day I stopped trying to win her approval. And when you stop trying to win something, you start realizing how little it was worth in the first place. After that, everything changed. Not dramatically, but steadily. I stopped volunteering for things I didn't want to do. Stopped apologizing for things I didn't break. Stopped making myself smaller so others could feel big. And people noticed, especially my mom. She started accusing me of being cold. "Who is this new version of you?" she asked once, like I'd joined a cult. But the truth was, I was finally becoming myself. Or maybe just remembering who I was before I became who they needed me to be. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. At that point, I was just tired. Tired in my bones. Tired of earning love that never arrived. Tired of holding up a family that never noticed the weight I carried. I didn't know it then, but I was on the edge of something. Not a breakdown, but a breaking open. And once that begins, you can't go back. People say family is unconditional. That no matter what happens, they'll love you. That's what they say. But in my house, love had conditions. And I was always just one mistake away from losing it. After I started pulling back, setting small boundaries, saying no to things I used to absorb without blinking, the shift in the air was immediate. It wasn't loud. It was worse. It was subtle. Eye rolls, long silences, conversations that stopped when I entered the room, like I was no longer a daughter, just a disruption. Matt, of course, noticed nothing. He still showed up unannounced, left dishes in the sink, and acted like I was his assistant. "Hey, can you check on Mom's meds? Can you call Dad about the car? Can you Venmo me till Friday?" And when I hesitated, even for a second, he'd get this look, like I was failing some unspoken contract. "You've changed," he said one night, squinting at me over a beer like I was a puzzle he didn't like anymore. I shrugged. "Maybe I'm just done playing the role." He laughed, sharp and cold. "Don't get all dramatic. You're not a victim." That word, victim, stung like acid. Because it wasn't drama. It was decades of quietly carrying everyone else's emotional garbage and finally setting it down. But when you stop playing your part in a dysfunctional system, the whole thing gets shaky. And people hate that. Because if you're not the fixer anymore, they might have to look at their own mess. The guilt trips came next. Little things at first. Mom would sigh loudly when I walked past without asking if she needed anything. She'd say things like, "I guess some people just don't have time for family anymore," while staring directly at me. One morning, I overheard her on the phone with my aunt. She said, "I don't know what's gotten into Emily lately. She's so cold now. It's like she thinks she's better than us. I stood in the hallway, frozen. She never once mentioned all the times I drove her to appointments, or stayed up with her when she had panic attacks, or skipped dates to be home when she didn't feel well. That part didn't make it into her version of the story. And that's when I realized something that wrecked me. They didn't want me. They wanted the version of me that never said no. The version that smiled on cue, picked up the slack, and never asked for anything back. They didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I did for them. And that nearly broke me. Because if your own mother only values you when you're convenient, what does that say about your worth? I started having dreams, vivid ones, of packing a suitcase and slipping out in the middle of the night. No note, no warning, just leaving. I'd wake up with my heart racing and tears on my cheeks. But in daylight, I stayed. Because leaving wasn't just scary. It felt selfish. That's how deep it went. They'd raised me to believe that saving myself was betrayal. I began journaling, scribbling at 2 a.m. in a half-lit room like a woman trying to piece together her sanity. And in those pages, I found a voice I hadn't heard in years. One that asked questions like, what if they never change? What if this is all there is? What if you deserve better? Even if they never say sorry. There wasn't a single clean break. No obvious exit sign. Just 1,000 tiny moments where I realized I was not loved the way I needed to be. And maybe I never would be. And that kind of grief, that doesn't scream. It sits in your chest like a stone. It steals your breath. It teaches you to disappear, gracefully, so no one notices. But something inside me was waking up. Something that whispered, not yet, but soon. It happened on a Sunday. I'd just come home from the grocery store, arms full, mind foggy. The kind of tired that clings to your bones even after 8 hours of sleep. I stepped inside and immediately knew something was off. The lights were on in the living room, too bright. The curtains drawn like they were hiding something. My mom was sitting rigid on the couch, arms folded. Matt was standing behind her, pacing like a lawyer prepping his opening statement. My stomach dropped. "Can you sit down for a minute?" my mom said, voice clipped but polite. That dangerous company's overtone she used when she wanted to appear calm while detonating bombs. I didn't sit. "Is something wrong?" Matt jumped in. "We're worried about you, Em." That word, worried, didn't feel like love. It felt like control, gift wrapped in concern. My mom added, "You've been distant, cold. You barely talk to us anymore." I stood there, holding a bag of oranges like a shield. "I've been working. Tired, that's all." Matt scoffed. "It's more than that. You're angry all the time. And rude. You think you're better than us." There it was. The accusation. Not concern. A pre-written script to make me the problem. "I never said that," I replied, calmly. Mom leaned forward. "We miss who you used to be." "You mean the version who never said no. The version who took the blame and thanked you for it." But I didn't say that. I just blinked. And then I asked, "Is this an intervention?" Silence. Matt shifted, then said, "Honestly, yeah, you need help." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Help. Not for anxiety, not for depression, but because I'd stopped catering to their needs. I laughed, just once, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You want to talk about needing help? Matt, you haven't held a job for more than 6 months in 5 years. And Mom, I've driven you to every doctor's appointment since I was 19, but now I need help? Their faces stiffened, like I'd broken some invisible rule. My mom's voice dropped. "We're just trying to get through to you before you ruin your life." I looked at her. Really looked. The woman who never hugged me without a reason. The woman who let me carry everything. Emotions, errands, expectations, and still found ways to call me ungrateful. "I'm not ruining anything," I said, voice shaking. "I'm finally realizing what I don't want anymore, and it scares you." Matt crossed his arms. "Wow, so now you're the victim and the hero." I put the bag of groceries on the floor. "I'm not the hero," I said softly. "I'm just done playing the villain in a story you both refuse to rewrite." And then I walked out. Not forever. Not yet. But enough. I sat in my car for almost an hour, engine off, hands trembling. It wasn't the words that hurt. It was the confirmation of what I'd feared all along. They didn't want me whole. They wanted me obedient. And when I stopped being useful, they staged a performance, not a conversation, an ambush disguised as love. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a friend's place. She didn't ask questions, just handed me tea and let me fall asleep on her couch with mascara streaking my cheeks. And somewhere between exhaustion and numbness, I whispered to myself, "This is not how my story ends." But first, I had to burn the part of me that kept believing I owed anyone an apology for outgrowing their dysfunction. It was late, past midnight. I was lying on my friend Julia's couch, still wearing jeans and yesterday's eyeliner, staring at the ceiling like it might answer something I couldn't name. The TV was on, low volume, some cooking show where everyone whispered and nothing dramatic ever happened. I wanted to crawl inside it, a place where the only tension was overcooked pasta. Julia came out from her room, holding 2 mugs. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. I shook my head. She sat down, handed me tea. Chamomile, like always. She didn't say much. She never did when I looked like this. She just waited. And that's when it happened. I said the words I had never said out loud. Not to her, not to anyone, not even to myself, really. "I think my family doesn't love me the way I need to be loved." She blinked, didn't flinch, just nodded once and said, "Yeah, I know." And I broke. Not all at once, not dramatically, just cracked. Tears spilled slowly, like water from a cracked pipe that had been leaking for years. Julia didn't try to fix it, didn't say, "Of course they love you," or "You're being too harsh." She just let me unravel, because she knew love, real love, doesn't gaslight your pain. I kept talking about the birthday cards Matt forgot, the way my mom only hugged me when other people were watching, how I could be sick or sad or quietly falling apart, and no one noticed unless it inconvenienced them. "I used to think something was wrong with me," I said. "That maybe I was just hard to love." Julia reached over and touched my hand. "You're not hard to love. You've just been loving people who made you earn what should have been given." That sentence lodged itself in my chest, like a key finally turning in a lock I didn't know I was still holding. All my life, I'd been performing. Polite, helpful, low maintenance, so afraid to be a burden that I became a ghost in my own story. But in that moment, on a couch that wasn't mine, in a silence that finally felt safe, I realized something. I didn't have to wait for their approval to heal. Their love, or lack of it, didn't define my worth. Their inability to see me clearly didn't mean I was invisible. I stayed at Julia's for 3 days. We ate takeout and watched trashy TV. We didn't talk about what next right away. She gave me space to breathe, to exist without tiptoeing around anyone's disappointment. It felt strange at first, to just be. No performance, no fixing, no apologizing for taking up space. And then one night, as we were brushing our teeth in the same tiny bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You don't have to go back." It was terrifying, but it was true. I didn't have a plan yet. I didn't have savings or a new place or some grand escape strategy. But I had something I hadn't had in years. Clarity. The clarity that came from finally telling the truth out loud. Even just once. That was the night I stopped trying to convince them of my value. The night I let their silence speak for itself. The night I decided that walking away might actually be the most loving thing I could do, for them and for me. Because staying wasn't loyalty anymore. It was self-abandonment, and I was done leaving myself behind. The day I moved out, no one noticed. No big fight, no dramatic exit, just a quiet Saturday morning, boxes in my trunk, and a single text to my mom. "I found a place. I'll send my new address soon. Please don't worry." She never responded, and somehow, that silence didn't hurt anymore. It confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Their love had limits, and I had finally reached mine. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, facing an alley and a crumbling fence. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I chose where I would wake up, what I would hear, who I'd let in. At first, the quiet felt unnatural. I'd spent years tuning myself to everyone else's chaos, listening for footsteps, tension, doors slammed in the distance. So when I sat alone on that creaky beige couch the first night, I half expected someone to walk in and ask me why dinner wasn't ready. But no one did. The stillness wrapped around me like a new kind of silence, not the weaponized kind. This one was soft, kind, empty, but not hollow. I cried in the shower that night, not from grief, but from relief. It hit me how much I'd held in, how many tears I swallowed because I didn't want to make things worse, how many times I'd convinced myself I was too sensitive instead of admitting I was quietly breaking. Now, the tears came freely, and no one barged in, no one accused me of overreacting, no one sighed loudly in the hallway. It was just me, and for the first time, that was enough. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight. Not from an alarm, not from yelling, just light, spilling gently through the window, like some kind of blessing. I made coffee, sat on the floor, let my legs stretch out, and in that moment, I realized something simple and radical. Peace doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it just looks like the absence of fear. There were hard days, of course. Days when I second-guessed myself, when I'd see old photos or get a memory notification and feel that tug in my chest, the ache of what could have been. Sometimes I'd reach for my phone to call my mom, then remember the sound of her voice that last week. Clipped, cold, disappointed. Like I'd betrayed some sacred contract by choosing myself. But even in those moments, I didn't regret leaving. Because healing doesn't mean pretending you were never hurt. It means learning how to live without the need for someone else's validation. I started journaling again. Not just rage scribbles, but reflections, gratitude, small wins. I made dinner for one. I bought a plant, and it's not dead yet. I laughed today, really laughed. I began noticing things I'd never seen when I was in survival mode. The way the light hit the kitchen tile at 4 p.m., the quiet joy of clean sheets, the luxury of choosing silence, not enduring it. It was strange, in a beautiful way, like I was slowly meeting myself for the first time. And she wasn't too much. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't broken. She was tired. But she was healing. Healing didn't arrive like a sunrise. It came in flickers, brief, bright, and often gone before I could hold them. Like the first time I walked into a grocery store and didn't panic over what my mom would say if I bought the wrong brand. Or the night I fell asleep without headphones, because for once, I wasn't trying to drown out anyone else's footsteps or slamming doors. One day, I rearranged my entire apartment, moved the bed under the window, bought a shelf from Facebook Marketplace, hung string lights, not because anyone would see them, but because I would. That shelf became a quiet altar. Not religious, just personal. On it, a tiny cactus I named Fern. My favorite quote written in shaky cursive. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that survived. A photo of me at age 7, grinning in a too big backpack. She looked happy, but I remembered the stomachache under that smile. I looked at her often. Not with pity, with compassion. I began to understand that she wasn't weak. She was surviving the only way she knew how. And now, I could take it from here. There were still hard days. Triggers I didn't expect. Like when someone raised their voice in a meeting and I flinched. Or when a friend canceled plans and I spiraled, convinced they secretly hated me. But instead of scolding myself, I started asking softer questions. What are you afraid of right now? What part of you still believes you're unworthy? What would you say to little Emily if she felt this way? Sometimes I wrote the answers down. Sometimes I just cried and let that be enough. I started seeing a therapist. It took me 3 tries to find one who didn't minimize my pain with phrases like, "It could have been worse," or, "At least they didn't hit you." The one I stayed with, Dr. Linton, was quiet, curious, and let the silences stretch until I filled them. One session, I told her, "I don't even know who I am when I'm not being useful." She smiled gently. "Then it's time to get curious." So I got curious. I took myself on walks, started cooking meals I actually liked, not just the ones I was praised for. Signed up for a pottery class where I made the ugliest bowl imaginable, and kept it. Because it didn't have to be perfect to be worth something. Neither did I. I reconnected with an old college friend who'd once told me, "You don't have to prove your pain to me." Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. Now, it's the only kind of friendship I want. And the weirdest part? I started to laugh again. Real laughter. Not the polite chuckles I used to offer to keep people comfortable. This was different. This was belly deep, head thrown back. I am alive laughter. It felt like rebellion, like freedom, because I was finally building a life where my joy didn't depend on anyone else's approval, where my boundaries weren't punishable, where I got to decide who I was and who I was becoming. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was healing, and that was enough. Every day, I gave myself permission to be messy, to grieve, to rest, to grow. And with each small, quiet choice, I stitched a new version of myself together. Not the version they wanted, not the one who kept the peace at her own expense, but someone real, someone whole, someone who finally believed that she never had to earn the right to be loved. I never meant to share this story. Not out loud, not with strangers, maybe not even with friends. For years, I thought if I said it, really said it, I'd unravel. Or worse, I'd be told I was exaggerating, being dramatic, making things up for attention. But the silence was heavier than the truth. It sat in my chest like a weight I'd learned to carry, until I didn't want to anymore. The first time I told someone, really told them, I was shaking. It was a support group. Small circle, warm light, folding chairs. I don't even remember what I said exactly, only that my voice cracked on the word invisible. And after I spoke, no one tried to fix me. No one minimized what I'd lived through. They just nodded, softly, as if to say, yes, we've been there too. And that broke something open inside me. Because when pain is finally witnessed, not explained away or smoothed over, it loses its power to isolate. Since then, I've told this story more than once. To people who looked at me in disbelief, to people who cried with me, to people who whispered, "You just said everything I've never had the words for." And with each telling, the shame dissolved, piece by piece. That's the thing about stories. They don't just release you. They reach others too. People who are still swallowing their grief in silence. People who've been told they're too much or not enough. People who are still living in homes where they've forgotten how to be real. So, if you're listening right now, if some part of this story sounds familiar, if you've ever sat in a quiet room wondering if you were the problem, I want you to hear me. You are not broken. You were never broken. You are surviving. And survival comes at a cost. Yes, but it also proves your strength. You get to choose what happens next. You get to walk away from the roles they gave you. You get to redefine what love looks like. You get to stop performing and start being. I don't have it all figured out. There are still moments where I freeze when my phone buzzes, expecting bad news or guilt. There are still memories that hit me out of nowhere. The sound of a slammed cabinet, a phrase I've heard 1,000 times, a picture from a life I no longer belong to. But now, I have tools. Now, I have boundaries. Now, I have myself. And that is more than I ever had before. Telling my story was never about revenge. It was about release, about letting go of the shame that never belonged to me. It was about turning my pain into something useful, something that could hold someone else through their own storm. So this voice you're hearing isn't just mine. It's the voice of every woman who sat in the background, holding her family together, while no one noticed she was falling apart. It's for every daughter who never got to be a child, every woman who was only loved when she was quiet, helpful, or easy, every soul who walked away without slamming the door just to save herself. I see you. And if no one has told you lately, you are allowed to choose peace over loyalty. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself. You are allowed to leave, even if they call it betrayal. Sometime, the most loving thing we can do is finally come home to ourselves. And if I could go back to that little girl in the too big backpack, to the young woman crying into her pillow after another silent dinner, to the version of me that still thought she had to earn love by disappearing, I'd tell her this. One day, you'll tell your story out loud, and it won't break you. It will set you free. If you're still here, thank you for listening. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a truth, a name you've stopped saying, you're not alone. Leave a comment if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or like you had to disappear to survive. You don't have to share everything. Just say, I feel this, and I'll know exactly what you mean. And if this story reminded you of someone, a friend, a sister, someone silently carrying too much, Send it to them. Sometimes, hearing someone else's truth gives us the strength to face our own. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, raw, honest, and healing, because I have so much more to share. And remember, you don't have to earn love by being small. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to heal out loud.